Cool. Well, what's up, Wake? Hey, how are you doing? Hey, guys. So just in case you haven't met me, my name is John. I have been on this leadership development program here at Stone Creek. I started back in August, and I am so excited I get to be here today. I brought a word for you. I think it's a lot of fun. Joe's just like, hey, write about whatever you want to write about. And I was like, sweet. So the title of my message tonight is called Goalies, Mathletes, and the People Who Sing. So go ahead, turn to the person next to you, say goalies, mathletes, and people who sing. Yeah, already you guys are like, why did they give him a microphone? But that's cool. But this is what's going on. Let me tell you just a little bit about myself. I want to get connected with you guys a little bit, all right? So here's something about me. Let's see. When I was in high school, I did a lot of stuff. I think a lot of you guys could probably relate to. It wasn't that long ago I was actually in your shoes in middle school and high school. I played football for about 10 years. When I played football, I played offense, I played defense, I was special teams, I was the water boy, I was the towel guy, the assistant coach, like whatever got me on the team, like I did it. I was there. And after I was done playing football, I moved on to football, or as we call it, soccer, right? The right name for it. And so in soccer, I played my whole life because that was just what my family did. We played soccer, and as you can tell, your boy don't run. All right, so I played goalie the entire time that I played soccer because running's not my thing. But talking about running, I was a part of the track and field team. Has anybody in here done track and field? Yeah, okay, all right, some excitement. Yeah, now track and field, those are some of my people. Like, we're all the people who aren't coordinated enough to play sport with the ball, but we're still really athletic. So we just joined the track and field team, and it's a lot of fun. We have a lot of good times with that. All right, this one might throw you through a loop a little bit. All right. How many cheerleaders do we have? Do we have any cheerleaders here? Yeah, there you go. Okay. Way more than I was expecting. Was definitely not expecting that. Okay, let me let you in on a little secret, something that not a lot of people know about me. All right. My senior year in high school, I was a cheerleader. Yes. 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 And for those of you imagining me in Spanx and a bow, please stop, all right? That's not okay. No, I never had to wear those things, but I was a cheerleader. And guys, before you judge me, just keep this in mind. I spent an entire season as the only guy on a team of cheerleaders. It was awesome. It was so much fun. I enjoyed it. And so it was a lot of fun. So as you can tell, I was really into sports. I was actually fit at one point in time. I had muscles and things. You can't tell now because I still don't run, right? But I was in shape. But I also did a lot of other things. I was part of this group that was called the Mathletes. Yeah. Oh, we have some mathletes. That's really surprising. Usually they don't admit it. Yeah. So mathletes, really what we are, if you've ever seen Mean Girls, that's the group that literally just did math for fun. So we would literally go, we'd show up, we'd grab paper, we'd grab pencils. If you were a rookie, you'd grab a calculator, and we'd sit down, and we would do nothing but math. And we thought that was fun for some reason. But quickly, I kind of came off of that one. But I also was involved in a bunch of different things. I was in the Bible club. I was in the German club. I was a musician all throughout. Do we have any musicians in here? Some people who sing. Yeah, we have any playing in the bands, maybe conducting the orchestra, right? Like musicians all around. There's people who always are making noise, and we just hope we're good at it. I played the saxophone for 8 years. And then after 8 years, I still wasn't good at it. So quickly dropped that one. My parents sold my saxophone as soon as I graduated, which was a blessing for everybody. But I was just involved in so many things. I even like to act, so I was in theater, right? So I love to be around people. And because I was around so many people, like I got to connect with people. Because let me tell you guys something about me that you may not know. I crave connection. Some of you crave attention, but I crave connection. I love connecting with people, and I'm going to be so bold as to bet that all of you crave connection too. So much of what we do is because we want to be connected. We all crave connection. Don't believe me? How many of you are on your phones right now? Oh, yeah, All the middle schoolers are like, oh, and all the high schoolers said nothing because they're on their phones not paying attention. Yeah, it was a good time. No, but yeah, here's something for you guys to know, right? These devices can keep us connected to anybody and everybody throughout the entire world, right? Research has said that the average high schooler spends 4.5 hours on their phone every day. Every day. That means like at least a quarter of the time that you're awake, you're on your phone. Yeah, some of you are like, those are rookie numbers. Get those up, all right? Yeah. And then it also says that of those 4.5 hours, 3 hours are spent on social media. And what is social media? Social media is connection. It's time for us to connect with the people and the world around us. And it said that in this room, the people who are in this room right now, all, if not most of you, have at least 5 social media platforms that you check every day. You guys are like counting through it now. You're like, yeah. No, that might be me. No, I have this one. I've got that one, right? Some of you are like, nope, 5's not enough, right? Like, I've got Instagram, Snapchat, I've got Facebook, Tumblr, Pinterest. I got TikTok, goodness gracious. All right, we've got WhatsApp, we got Twitch, we've got YouTube, we've got Vine. The Vine's dead, no, so don't worry about that one, right? But like, we've got all of these different apps, and some of you are like, yeah, I check all of those in the morning before I even turn off my alarm, which by the way is also an app on my phone, right? We crave connection, right? So much so that just take a second, right? Think about how do you feel when you see this? Yeah, Halloween's not over yet, right? Some of you guys, you see that and your heart sinks. Some of you have almost like an anxiety, like a panic attack, right? Half of you are checking your phones now just to make sure that's not happening to you. Why? And why? It's because we hate to be disconnected. We don't want to ever be disconnected from anything, right? When you go over to a friend's house, before you even say hi to their parents, before you even pet their dog, the first thing you ask is, hey, what's the Wi-Fi password? Yeah. I guarantee you that it's true for most of you. It's a crazy thing. We all crave connection. And why? Why do we crave connection? Because we were created for connection. We were created for connection. Wired deep within each of us is a longing and a desire to be in relationship and connection with people around us. But more than that, more than just the people around us, you and I, every man, woman, and child, has been created by God in the image of God to be connected to God, right? We are created by God in the image of God to be connected with God. We've been wired for a connection with God. In Psalm 63, we meet King David. And King David, well, we don't meet him. He's been around for a while, I suppose. But King David, he was a writer. He was a poet. He was a singer. He was a shepherd. He was a warrior. He was a king. He was a dancer, right? Like, he had a lot going on. He was very well connected with lots of people around him. And yet, even through those connections, he realized that his greatest desire was a greater connection with God. So in Psalm 63, we read that he says, "O God, you are my God. I earnestly search for you. My soul thirsts for you. My whole body longs for you in this parched and weary land where there is no water." David had connections. He was able to connect with lots of people around him. And he had every connection that anybody might need or want. He had power. I mean, he was literally the king, right? He had power. He had money. He had friends. And if he ran out of friends, he could just buy more friends, right? Like, he had anything any of us could ever want or need. And yet, at the same time, he knew that his soul was wired for a deeper connection with God. And the same is also true for you and me. You and I are wired for connection with God. I mean, we can even see this because in the other times we get connected, it's not quite the same, right? There's been times for some of you where you've looked on your account and you found that this is the time where you've had the most likes on a post that you've ever had before. And you get a little excited, but then you think, there's got to be something more. There's something missing here. Some of you are here hanging out with friends, or anywhere else you're hanging out with friends. Your best friends are around you. You're having a good time, but still on the inside, you're just like, there's something more. There has to be something more, I'm just feeling like I'm missing something, right? And it doesn't matter at any point in time, right, how many followers you have, how many likes you have. It doesn't matter if you finally get that award or you find yourself on that stage. It doesn't matter if you finally get to sit at that table or if you get invited to that party and get to go there. It doesn't matter if you get that job. No, all those times when we get surrounded by all those people, when we get to check our profile and see all of these followers we have, we still say, it's not enough. I need something more. I need something deeper. And that's because all of us are longing for a connection with God. Tonight, we're going to take a few moments to talk about that connection in a very practical and continual way. And I guarantee some of you are probably going to pull a muscle in your brain from rolling your eyes so hard when I say this. But the way that we get to connect with God is through worship. It's through worship. You know, David, above everything else, he was an amazing worshiper. He knew that he could connect with God through singing, through dancing, through raising his hands, through writing songs, through engaging in worship with God. So I want to tell you another story. This is a favorite story of mine. I'm not really sure why, but it is. But the story is found in John chapter 4. And in John chapter 4, this is a story about the woman at the well. Some of you might know it, but for those of you who don't, let me set it up for you a little bit. Jesus is going from a town called Judea to a town called Galilee. And in the middle of this town was this place called Samaria. And at Samaria, if you lived in Samaria, you were called a Samaritan, right? We got that? Same page? Cool. And what happened was the Jews of that day hated the Samaritans. They were like the social outcasts and the rejects of that time. They would do anything they can to avoid them. It could take them about 2 days to get from one town to the other, but they would add extra time to their journey just so they could go around Samaria so they wouldn't have to interact with these Samaritans. But then Jesus shows up in the classic way that Jesus does, and he breaks the status quo. And instead of going around Samaria, he decides to go through Samaria. But not only does he just go through Samaria, but he decides to engage with a woman there. Not get engaged with a woman there, but to engage with a woman there. And the thing about this woman was that she, too, was a little bit of an outcast. See, she was out there in the middle of the day getting water for herself because she was too ashamed of the life that she had been living to be around in public. See, most people would go in the mornings or in the evenings when it wasn't so hot out to go and get the water, and they'd spend the rest of their time in the town. But she decided that she would spend her time away from people because she was so ashamed of the people she knew. And in that moment of shame and regret and vulnerability, Jesus shows up. And he connects with her on a level that was deeper than any connection she had so far, which is saying a lot because this woman had 5 husbands. Talk about a hustle, right? 5 husbands. This is as if like Hannah B, right, instead of giving a rose to all the contestants, just decided to marry everybody on The Bachelorette, right? Like she had 5 of them. And not only did she have 5 husbands, but there was also another guy that she was sleeping with. So life was looking kind of not so great, right? She was tangled in this web of lust and lies, which honestly kind of sounds like a TLC show, but we're just going for it anyway, right? But let me just pause for a second, and I want to put this into perspective for you. I genuinely think that this woman was starving for connection. That there was something in her that she knew that there was something more, and she just wanted to connect. And right at this state, we see Jesus come in and connect with her and tell her about how she can have a connection with God on this earth and in the life to come that would be satisfying and it could be everything that she ever wanted. And so as they're talking about this, we see that we pick it up in verse 20 in John chapter 4, and it says, this is her talking to Jesus. She says, "So tell me, why is it that you Jews insist that Jerusalem is the only place of worship, while we Samaritans claim that it's here at Mount Gerizim where our ancestors worshiped," right? So she's like, okay, hold up. Before we go any further, like, let's talk about this worship thing, right? You guys say that you've got to worship over here, and we say that we have to worship over here, right? What's going on with that? So Jesus, as he usually does, comes back with this, and he says, "Believe me, dear woman, the time is coming when it will no longer matter whether you worship the Father on this mountain or in Jerusalem. You Samaritans know very little about the one you worship, while we Jews know all about him, for salvation comes through the Jews." Jesus is basically like, listen, it doesn't matter. All right? It might have mattered in the past, but now it doesn't matter. There's something greater that's come where it doesn't matter if you worship over here or you worship over there, right? God's not going to be up in heaven playing goalie, knocking down your prayers and your worship because you didn't worship in the right place, no? All right? That's not what's going on here, all right? And so Jesus continues. He says, the time is coming, indeed, it's here now, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. The Father is looking for those who will worship him that way. That God is spirit, so those who worship him must worship with spirit and truth. This woman asks a question about how to get a deeper connection with the one that she's made to connect with. And Jesus makes it clear here that God is seeking for those worshipers. He is looking for those who will worship him in that way. And what is that way? We see that it's in spirit and in truth. And God is saying here too, he's just reiterating, it doesn't matter if it's there, it doesn't matter if it's here. It doesn't matter if you belong to this group of people or that religion. It doesn't matter, you don't have to go through a priest or a pastor. You don't have to go to church to do it. You don't have to be a good singer to worship. I'm looking for people who worship in spirit and in truth. And so if that's so important, we got to learn what it is. And so when Jesus says in spirit, he's telling you and he's telling me that he's seeking people who are engaged in worship with their whole heart. Their whole heart. That's all that means. And some of you are like, well, I don't know. I haven't even given my heart to Jesus or whatever that is or whatever. That doesn't matter. Jesus isn't saying you have to have a great theology. It doesn't mean, he's not saying that you have to be super connected and very spiritual. No, what he's saying is that you just have to have a passion in your heart to find that connection, to engage in that worship and connect with God. That's what it means for us to have a heart and worship in spirit. And the cool thing about this too is that as we worship, we tune our hearts with God. We find that connection that we've been seeking, that we've been made for when we worship in our hearts. It's like a guitar, right? If you have a guitar and it's out of tune, what good is that to you? No, the guitar has to be in tune for it to be able to complete the purpose that it was made for. A guitar out of tune can't do what it was made for. And our hearts out of tune can't connect to God the way that we were made to connect to God. So as we worship, we don't have to be completely right or 100% sure that this is it, but we just have to say, my heart has a passion for God, and that's where I'm starting for. So we got that worshiping in spirit, but what about that worshiping in truth? Worshiping in truth, if spirit is our heart, worshiping in truth is our heads. It's our minds, right? We've got to be able to focus in and engage in worship. We've got to rely on our knowledge and our understanding of God and allow that to be focused in as we worship. Now, this doesn't mean that, again, we have to have super good theology. It doesn't mean that you have to have the Bible memorized. It doesn't mean that you have to be able to give a great dissertation on Romans. It doesn't even mean that you have to know what dissertation means. It doesn't even mean that you have to know what Romans is. You just have to have your mind and what you know of God and have that lined up and focused in as you worship. So maybe your knowledge of God is very little. Cool. That's fine. Maybe some of you are like, I could probably own this guy in some Bible trivia. That's fine too. It doesn't matter where you're at. What it matters is that your mind, whatever it is on that level of knowledge of God and understanding of him, is focused on God in our worship, right? And I got to talk about it because no one else will. Those mathletes. Man, when you're a mathlete, you come in, and it doesn't matter if you're good at math or not. As you just go for it, you start to learn, and you just start to go. You get a little bit better at it as time goes on, mostly because no one's talking to you because we're all introverts, right? But as we're going along, even if we're not good at math, we still do what we can. And we still work on the parts that we can. And as we do that, we learn a little bit more. New knowledge comes easier to us, and we keep going. Who would have ever thought that being a mathlete would be like a spiritual point in worship? What about that? How about that? Look at God. All right, so anyways, in this story, we can see that God doesn't care where we come from, doesn't care who we are. Honestly, the only thing that he cares about in our worship is that we are genuinely trying to connect with him, right? That we have engaged our hearts, our spirit in worship, that we have engaged our minds, our truth and spirit. And he wants to connect with you like he's never connected before. And so what does that look like for you as high schoolers and for middle schoolers here tonight? Well, first, I believe it looks like engaging our hearts every time that we worship. Engaging our hearts every time that we worship. This means even when you're not feeling like it, you do it. It means like even when you're having a kind of a bad day, you still do it. It means like even when you don't like that song, we still engage our hearts saying, I have a passion for Jesus that can't stop here. It's got to keep going even in the midst of my circumstances. So we sing, we lift our hands, we shout, sometimes out of key, but we engage in worship. We allow what's hidden in our hearts to come out publicly in the way that we worship. And I can just think of a time in my own life where this happens. I remember coming in, and there's been a time, I feel like a lot of you could probably relate to this. I was pretty stressed. Has anybody in here ever been stressed before? Wow. How about that? Yeah. I was so stressed that I was not ready to worship. I didn't care. I didn't feel about it. And this is coming from a guy who's in Bible school. I didn't want to worship. But I came, and I was singing and everything, and we were singing this song called Waymaker. You guys just sang it a little bit ago. And at that point in the song, it says, even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. Because you never stop working. And I just took a second to think about that, and I thought of all the times in the past when I didn't see how God was working. I didn't see how he was coming through my circumstances. He was going to come and make a way through all of this, and yet he did. It was hard for me to see really in those moments, right? Like, what was Jesus doing in my life? What was God planning for me? How is he going to get me through this circumstance? But then I realized, even when I don't feel like things are working out, God's working. God's moving. And I could tell you, yeah, I was stressed. I had a lot going on. I didn't know what was coming next. But then I turned my heart to God, and I'll tell you what, a peace came over me like never before. And I just realized, if God has been faithful to me in the past, how can I not think he's going to be faithful to me now? I started to engage in a heartfelt worship. So some of us, we need to do that too. We strive on Wednesday nights here to give you guys a place where you can engage in worship. So you can listen to music, you can open the word, you can pray, you can do all of these things. We want that for you. I desire that for you to be able to connect, but you've got to be able to turn your hearts in and focus in on that worship. And then the second part, not only do we need to engage our hearts, but we need to focus our minds on God. And that's kind of hard to focus your mind on God when we've got a bunch of other things going on. It's really hard for you to read your Bible if you're scrolling through Instagram. Real quiet now. It's real hard for us to pray when we're doing things that we're not supposed to be doing right now. It's really hard for us to focus on God when we have a bunch of homework we've been putting off. It's really hard for us to spend time with God when we're spending time with other people that we should have been spending time with God. For me, it's hard for me to think about God when I've hit snooze 5 times instead of getting up to actually do my devotional. But I'm sure none of you can relate to that. But it's kind of hard for us to focus on some of these things when we have all these other distractions going on. So we've got to do what we can to eliminate these distractions from our mind, to eliminate these things from going on around us. And this is going to look different for all of you. Some of you, you're going to need to put your phone away for a little bit. Some of you means not standing next to somebody while you're worshiping. Some of you means stop thinking about that thing that has been bugging you all day and just focus your mind on God. And when we remove these distractions, it helps us to remember who God is, what he's doing for us, and what he's promised for us. I mean, when we think of who he is and what he's done, I think of Jesus, who he sent as a sacrifice for us, right? He came, he lived a perfect life for us. He went against the status quo so he could come and he could connect for us. And then after living a perfect life, he still died on the cross, taking your sins with him and gone. And then he rose on the third day to say, hey, not today, Satan, right? He said, I am victorious over all of this. And when we can tune our minds into those things and we can see and remember the things that God has done for us in Jesus, the things that he's done for us in our past, the way that we've made it through those tough situations, and man, what a game changer it can be for our lives. Sorry, I'm very passionate about this. So, we're going to go into a little bit of a time of a response. We're going to have a chance to worship. And students, let me tell you, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you're going through. It doesn't matter what you've done. There is nothing that can separate you from God and his love except yourself. So now this is going to be the time for you to decide for yourself. Am I going to allow myself to engage my heart and my mind in worship? Am I going to be able to look for that connection that I so desperately crave? It's going to be completely and totally up to you. God has been pursuing you. He passionately wants you. He has you in mind, and he wants you to know him more and more. That's the way he designed you. So it's time for us to think about if we're ready, if we're willing to engage in worship in spirit and in truth. So we're going to go ahead and pray real quick. I'm going to say, God, thank you for this gift of worship. Thank you for this chance to connect with you. Thank you for this way that you've made us, where you've given us a connection that will never be disconnected, and we have something that we will always be able to rely on. Lord, I pray that tonight, all of these students in here, all of the leaders, Lord, that we'll be able to remove all the things that are going on in our hearts and in our minds that will keep us from worshiping you. Help us to engage in worship in spirit and in truth, and help us to have a better and deeper and lasting connection with you. Lord, we love you. It's in your name I pray. Amen.